You said that you lived in Vancouver. How long have you lived in Hamilton?
I moved to Hamilton in 2008.
So then when you first moved to Hamilton, like what foods do you like cook with, or like ingredients do you need that, like, and I imagine like Hamilton in 2008, like there wasn't a lot of options for like, food that's not white. So like what did you struggle to find?
Yeah, I love this question because it was super lonely. I knew nobody. I had no community here. I had no friends. And I was living with my partner who was born and raised in the area and has her friends are here, all of her family's here. So I really felt quite out of my own sort of sense of self and groundedness here.
Yeah.
And so to feel that, to sort of come back to that, food is the one of my key places that I go to, right? It's like sanctuary. And it's you know from of my family, of my mother,
Mhm.
as complicated as my family is and my relationship with my family is, there is intrinsically through food a sense of belonging, and also um uh you know ancestral history and um connections to like all of it is in food.
Yes.
Yeah. And so my go-to is miso soup in the way in which my grandmother made it, and she doesn't
Mhm.
make it the way that the restaurants make it. She makes it like we come from like a peasant working class and craft based lineage, and so her miso soups are very hearty. There's potato, like chunks of potato and chunks of turnip and all the root vegetables like
Oh.
onions, so it's very hearty. And so but it's also very simple. And so the
Mhm.
hardest thing to get was the tofu, the type of tofu that um that my family eats, which is a soft tofu and not firm tofu. But
Mm.
in like the hippie vegetarian culture, they all eat firm tofu,
Mhm.
and I can't eat that shit, and it's not happening. And that's also the key protein of this soup.
Yes.
And so, and the other thing is like fish, like
Mm.
um I laugh at this now. It was like totally angry at the time. When I was 13, I became vegetarian. And when I told my mom that, she was like, yeah, yeah, whatever, no problem, I don't care. And then, the next meal or whatever, there's like fish, because we always eat fish, of seafood of some kind. And I'm like, yeah, no, mom, I don't eat this. Like, I'm vegetarian now. And she's like, yeah, there's vegetables. There's no meat. I'm like, no, no fish. Fish is an animal. And she was just like, couldn't her brain just could not compute that. And she's like, are you telling me you're not eating fish and you don't eat seafood anymore? And she like looked at me sternly in the face and she's like, you are Japanese. You need to eat seafood. And I'm like, I was so upset at the time, and I laugh at that now because it's like seafood is such a part of, deeply entrenched in her identity.
Like how can you have to choose, you know, being a
Yeah.
vegetarian or just being Japanese. What it doesn't Can't have it both ways.
So yeah, totally. So
Wow.
I laugh at that now, but I was oh yeah, that there was a huge fight around that at the time. But yeah, and of course, at the time I didn't have a deeper sense of identity at the age of 13, I was coming into my own.
Mm.
And so yeah, I do see that story differently now, but also like the different ways of understanding that. But anyway, so yeah, fish. Anyway, going back to the soup,
Yes,
fish.
fish.
Fish was also hard to get, because the
Mm.
way that we would get our fish in Vancouver would be like the whole fish, and not like
Oh,
filleted or like prepared, like already
frozen.
done.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. Or frozen. Like it was always fresh, and it was always the
Mhm.
whole fish. So I had to adapt here, and
Mhm.
it really gave me a sense of being inland.
Mm.
Like when you're here and there's like the lake, and but it's like when you don't have access to fresh seafood,
Yeah.
you really feel that you're inland. That was something that was a new experience for me. I remember being quite like, that felt so out of place, even though we have the lake here.
Yeah, but it's like you don't want to
It's
eat
just
anything that comes out of it.
right. Well, this is it. Yeah,
I
exactly. Yeah.
wouldn't trust it.
Yeah. Yeah. And also lake fish is so different from ocean fish,
I've been
right?
told.
Yeah, it is so different. And so then, you know, feeling this difference of like place and food, and like local food, was not only a way of feeling quite out of place, but it also became an experience of like feeling where I am. So the fish that's here is lake fish from Superior,
Mm.
this white lake fish I never had before. And so I'm learning about where I am, and
Mm.
through food, through
Yeah,
the food that
for
is locally
sure.
available, right? And that the apples are different here,
Mm.
um, like all of that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, it's one thing to feel, connected to that which but it's also, the local foods became an invitation for me to learn about coming into this new place that I'm in, right?
Yeah,
So it was both of those things.
for
Yeah.
sure. It's,
Mhm.
oh, yeah. You just like you're growing with the place. It's growing on you almost.
And literally in you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Wow. I'm mind blown.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And like the
Oh.
very soil that we are in, and the very water, like the lakes that we are surrounded by, when we're eating them, we're bringing that land into our bodies, and it's like an
Mm.
introduction into, this is where you are now, and
Yeah.
this is, it's, yeah, it's
Whoa.
yeah,
My
it's a
God.
beautiful exchange, and
It
also
is.
a way of coming into an unknown place,
Mm-hmm.
and finding belonging,
Mm-hmm.
in a new place, and taking out that sort of unknown into curiosity, invitation,
Mm-hmm.
welcoming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the way that you view food and the way that like you're very reflective and like, like conscious of what you're eating and like how that connects you to the land that we're on and, the people who have cared for the land. Um, like I really, really love that connection when we talk about food, when people talk about, emotions that food brings. I feel like we often miss that connection of like, yeah, like the land and like, the food, like the relationship that we have to the food and how the food kind of literally grounds us to the land.
Mm.
Um, it's really beautiful to think about. I'm also thinking, like, I don't know about you, but like sometimes I'm like feeling really nostalgic and like I'm so ready to like book a plane ticket and take alone and go back home because I miss back home so much.
Mm.
And then what I'll do is like I'll instead end up making a meal. Um, what would that meal be for you?
Like just a regular, not non-special meal that my mom would make, which is like a bowl of rice,
Mhm.
some grilled fish, like spring salmon from Vancouver, or
Mm,
sockeye piece of sockeye salmon from Vancouver,
mm,
some salted plums,
ooh,
some seaweed, and some like steamed vegetables on the side, like just really just plain, nothing fancy. And that's often actually, that's a very typical breakfast, especially if there's like a little bit of miso soup on the side. That's a very typical
mm,
Japanese breakfast. But it, yeah, it has it's so comforting to me,
yeah,
and it makes me feel um loved and cared for. And yeah, I just feel like I know who I am when I'm eating
yeah.
that, you know?
Mhm,
Um, yeah. And I remember like when I was young, and I moved out on my own for the first time. And then like I
mhm,
moved to Ontario, to Toronto, and
mhm.
you know, it's deeply isolating, super lonely,
Yeah,
trying to figure out how to care for my own self, pay my bills, like get
mhm,
around, like do life and do, you
yeah,
know, do the things. And like I needed someone to care for me, and I didn't
mhm,
have anyone.
mhm,
And it would be, you know, something like that, that would be the gesture of
yeah,
my mother caring for me.
mhm.
That's what that would be. Yeah.
It's like
So
puts you back in that place and the moments of time when you felt that warmth and safety and comfort and care and like you said, love.
mhm.
And but you're creating it for yourself, which is also like kind of like, it's like giving yourself a hug almost, which is really beautiful. I'm glad it's also that it's your comfort food and go-to food is easy to make because mine is not. And it's like, well, I feel like crap, but I want this meal, but I know I'm going to have to put a lot of energy into making it. So I love that. That's actually perfect.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah. I mean, yeah, and you know, another comfort food or special food would be like, you know, a sponge cake or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, not making that. The places where I do get hard to find ingredients would be the it's I think it's called B&T Grocery. It's on Queen
Mhm.
Street
Mhm.
and Peter, or actually Queen Street and York.
Okay,
Peter,
I
yeah,
can.
it's a, yeah, you know, it's a little plaza, and it's an Asian food market. They have a fishmonger in the back, and then they have
Ooh.
like produce, like I think a double aisle of produce, and then a bunch of dried goods in the middle. And then on the far side, they have like eggs, dairy, and then they have fresh tofu in buckets.
Fresh
And that's how
tofu.
they had fresh tofu in buckets. And that's how I used to buy tofu like back in the 80s, from like the tofu guy on the street in Vancouver. And he, literally, it was a hole in the wall with like white plastic buckets, and there was fresh tofu in them that they made on like there on the spot. And they've been making it like that for like, I don't know, 100 years or something, or you know, whenever the first immigrants came to, you know, Vancouver, and we're like, we need tofu, we're gonna make it ourselves.
Love that.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, right? It's like, if it's not here and you can
Yes.
make it,
Yes.
right?
Make it and make it for others. Definitely also a huge dream for me for racket is like when this pandemic is over is to have like a massive community potluck.
Oh,
Uh
so
so
good. Oh, you know, that would be an amazing. coming together, celebration, like when, you know, it's like post COVID, like it's like,
Yeah.
yay.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then we give all the hugs.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much for all of this. This was an incredible conversation. I didn't imagine all the directions that we would be going, and I found it very like beautiful and nourishing. Yes, like it's hard to find ingredients and make exact food that like my grandma would make. Um, but like there's food here that like you're totally right that like has become a part of me. And like so I love that as a thought as well. Like very mind-blowing.
Mm,
Definitely a huge takeaway for me. I
awesome.
really, really appreciated this. And I'm looking forward to having more conversations with you about food. If you ever want to cook with us, um, that would be so, so nice. And we go whatever direction you want to. I'm just there to like maybe translate when needed. Um, and
Cool. Let's do it.
that would be so beautiful.